let's turn to some of the revelations from yesterday, the biggest ones, and I want to get people's reaction to them. So, as you mentioned already, Congresswoman, this wealth of Secret Service material, not a replacement for the scandalously deleted texts, but quite a lot, quite a treasure trove that you made very good use of, including real bone-chilling kinds of accounts of what the marauders were planning to do and how prepared they were, their military gear and the like. So was the case made that, so all those came out, it was clear the FBI knew and the Secret Service knew. That's going to be a separate potential issue, scandal in and of itself. The White House was briefed on it. Do we think that the committee showed that Trump himself was aware of just how violent his supporters were planning to be before, by the morning of January 6th?
My strong memory, because I had to write about this at the time, was at the last hearing, and Congressman Lofgren, please, correct me if you think I miss a nuance here. But in the last hearing, it was pretty brought home pretty strongly that the president was talking with one of his top aides, I believe that's Tony Ornato, White House Deputy Chief of Staff, actually on detail from the Secret Service. And that person let him know that there were weapons in the crowd. And Trump's reaction to the idea that there were people with weapons outside the corral where his speech was going to be that morning, his reaction was, take the magnetometers down, which they use to screen anybody coming in for weapons to make sure the president is not assassinated. And Trump's reaction was, they're not here to hurt me, let them in. Now,
and he did it again during the speech.
The second part of that sentence was, they can march to the Capitol from here.
Also, I'm sorry, but why is the Secret Service desperately keeping him away from the Capitol?
So I'm going to just offer the Secret Service view. As I said, agents were calling me that after the hearing and the morning before, complaining about like this amazing intelligence failure, but also complaining that if there's a threat of a weapon, there are law enforcement, let me put it this way, there are law enforcement officer ceremonies that the president attends to celebrate and congratulate a group of law enforcement officers for any number of reasons. All of those officers sworn to faithfully carry that weapon and not use it for any ill purpose. All of their weapons are taken off of them when they come to that event. So how is it safe once you learn there's a Glock, a pistol, a man in a tree with a rifle, a guy who's detained by police hiding an assault rifle? How is it safe, outside the corral or not, to have so many armed people on federal property, a felony? How is that? We know that the White House was shot at from 750 yards with an assault rifle in 2011. So how is it that this little bike rack that you've set out a certain amount of territory is safe? Of course, the answer is no.
They should have pulled the event, but that would have been impossible because this was part of the president's plan to assemble the mob and to send them off to attack the Capitol.
I mean, this goes to this separate issue of, the hearings were so fascinating and obviously their main significance is what they revealed with respect to Donald Trump and the danger he poses and continues to pose. But I think with respect to the FBI and the Secret Service and the Department of Homeland Security that had main functions to perform, this is such a singular indictment of them. And it's I think Chris Wray's testimony before Congress is highly suspect in light of all of the hearings where he suggested this was sort of an intelligence failure and not being aware of things, and also claiming that the FBI internal rules sort of prevented sort of learning more, which is not true. Knowing the FBI internal rules is not true. To me, this is not an intelligence failure at all. This is an absence of will to respond. And I think there's politics involved. I think there's race involved. I mean, this is my own opinion on this, but I think there's a variety of a constellation of things that go into why this happened. And that's where I hate to put more on the administration's plate, but I do think that for the president and for Avril Haines and for Merrick Garland, these agencies are now theirs, and a lot of these, certainly the leadership of the FBI is the same leadership, and so part of this is, shouldn't there be more accountability? At the very least, I was trained under Director Mueller, and one of the things that he beat into you was, you had to, when there was a problem, you had to figure out what happened. You had to be completely candid about what happened, and you had to have a plan that you made public as to how you were going to fix it. And then internally, he was big on auditing that plan. And just this idea of that's what and there's so many instances, by the way, where the director did that right after, for instance, the Boston bombing. I still remember the night of, he told me to get and put out publicly what we knew internally about the suspects, because he said the press is going to be all over this. They have a right to know, and whatever it is, it is. So he didn't even know the answer at that point about how the FBI had handled it. But he was like, we have to, the public has a right to know, and we have to deal with that. And that's what I'm seeing missing.
Well, there is some things missing. And as was said, I think by Mr. Aguilar at the hearing, some of the testimony received by witnesses from the Secret Service lack credibility based on the other evidence that we have received. And so the question is, among many questions, was this negligence or was it intentional? Were people participating in an attempt to overturn the government, or were they merely not understanding the depth of the threat? Were they blind to what was happening because of their own political orientation? For example, wasn't in the hearing, but it'll be in the report. We saw emails from line officers, not decision makers, in the Secret Service. Was it Antifa a day afterwards? I mean, Kevin McCarthy knew the day as it was happening. So it could be a mix of these things. I mean, a lot of the Secret Service agents are huge Trump supporters, and they may have been blinded to some extent by their political orientation, or it could be worse. We need to find out.
It's remarkable. I wonder if we are going to be able to get to the bottom of it, especially if the House changes hands, and the fact that
Not something that I accept as going to happen, let me point out.
Right. So objection noted and endorsed. But anyway, the fact, of course, that there's been at best sort of squirreliness and at worst misrepresentation of what the agencies know certainly is a bad odor to start out here. Carol, I just want to turn back to you because you've really been the lead in breaking the story here with the Secret Service, et cetera. What's your thoughts about where things go? Obviously, I mean, you won't reveal sources, of course, but I just want to give you a chance to comment because I think you've been out front more than anyone in the country.
Well, I share the Congresswoman's burning question about what was motivating the Secret Service on a couple of different fronts, because this is supposed to be a patriotic, apolitical organization. The people elect them, we protect them. But what was steering the possibility that they would still plan to take Donald Trump to the Capitol while officers were being beaten with flagpoles and bear spray? Who was still keeping that flame alive, and why? And rewinding, why did the chief information officer agree to wipe every single phone while he had in front of him, and his boss had in front of him, a request from a congressional committee for those records? Was that like, I'm clueless and I don't know my job? Who was influencing that? I also, I have to say that one of the burning questions for me is how much Donald Trump cowed his agency versus people inside were trying to enable him. It strikes me that Tony Ornato may be a very nice person, but all the reporting that I've done about him has revealed the ways in which he enabled Donald Trump in the worst moments. The clearing of praying protesters at Lafayette Square because Donald Trump wanted a great photo op to show that he was still in control of the country amid George Floyd protests. Tony Ornato was at the center of that. Tony Ornato was at the center of the president getting to all sorts of events that were dangerous for the public that became super spreaders for COVID. We won't go down that road, but I want to understand that better. I hope there's another hearing where we get to see the testimony, Congresswoman, of those individuals now that you have all the records in hand. And some of the records you have in hand may not help your central and streamlined narrative about Donald Trump's central role in this riot, in fomenting it, in denying the election results, but could be really helpful to fixing an agency that has a really noble past, could be really helpful in making it stronger.
Well, let me just say, I mean, I do think there are serious problems at the agency, and that's not to disparage many of the officers who perform bravely and honorably, and we're grateful, but there is a problem over there. I mean, very clearly. We do have more questions for Mr. Ornato and Mr. Engel, and we will get them. And what we find out, we've never, whatever we find out is what we find out. I mean, it's like we can't, we're not trying to just find one thing out. But I will assert this. I don't think the plot to overthrow the government was hatched by Tony Ornato. There were a lot of people who were involved as tools of the president's plot. And the question is, how far did that extend into some of these agencies?